Hi, and welcome to Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. In this episode, we're going to look at the latest news. There's two articles with regards to House of the Dragon, as you probably guessed from the opening montage. The first one is from Screen Rant. I'm just going to go straight into this one because it's talking about doing a bit of Game of Thrones retconning, or at least I think it's going to be contextualising Season 8. Hopefully in some way of sort of softening the blow that we all felt when we watched Season 8. You know, mould the disappointment somewhat. But anyway, we'll go straight in. We'll have a look at this first one. So as you see, the headline there, House of the Dragon hints at a perfect Game of Thrones Ret-Con. It needs something. I'm pretty sure I speak for the vast majority of people who watched the first 7 series of Game of Thrones, loved it, and then could not believe their eyes when Season 8 came out. It was almost though they deliberately destroyed the franchise. It's like they were leaving, let's salt the earth. I'm pretty sure they deliberately destroyed it like that so that no one could ever come after them and improve it, because they knew they'd run out of steam. I was so disappointed with it. But I can't keep on about it because it does disappoint. It does depress me somewhat. But I am optimistic and hopeful, as you know, if you've been following the channel, about House of the Dragon. It's looking really good. And let's have a look to see what they're going to do. If they're going to do anything, of course. Done the headline, let's go in. House of the Dragon is set long before Game of Thrones. We know that's about 200 years. But images hint at how it could be changing and adding to elements of the show's lore. Created by George R. R. Martin and Ryan Condal, the Targaryen-centric spin-off House of the Dragon takes place almost 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones. And this is a very different Westeros. One with the House Targaryen dynasty in full swing. Dragons soaring in the sky, and the ruin to their legacy done by the Mad King, heiress to second Targaryen, is still a long way off. Still, that doesn't mean there won't be some connections to Game of Thrones. Well, obviously, the whole setup of Game of Thrones is going to come from here, because you're going to have to establish all the families. You're doing the backstories and things. So this is why I think it's going to work so well. Although it is more Targaryen based rather than all the others. But they will be in. There will be the others coming in. So moving on. While House of the Dragon is its own unique show and aims to be different, it will still have ties to Game of Thrones. That certainly goes on a more macro level. The dragons, the Targaryens, the Iron Throne, which now looks more like the books, a scary, spiky, towering seat. And the inclusion of other houses, the Lannisters, Baratheons and eventually Starks will all play their part. Those elements will invariably colour Game of Thrones differently. Perhaps especially Daenerys Targaryen's controversial Mad Queen ending, which would be better explained, or at least more contextualised, by having so many more Targaryens. Yeah, and I think if you're showing that madness and lust for power is a Targaryen trait, then that may, it may soften that sort of that harsh ending. When we watched Game of Thrones, we didn't see her descend into madness. It was almost as though it was a flick of a switch. And of course, madness isn't like that. It should be a descent. And it would have worked perfectly well if you'd have spent from, say, season 7 setting the seeds of the madness up and slowly drip feeding in that motion, that momentum to madness. And then, say, beginning of 8, it starts leaping. It's not just a switch. It's not just bang and she's mad. And it's just like things, and people realising that she's starting to become a liability and a danger. That would have been a much better way of doing it. But hey, what do you know? I'm not the writer. Anyway, it will also be in the smaller details too, though. House of the Dragon will no doubt have plenty of Game of Thrones Easter eggs, and one that's already been revealed sets up an interesting retcon. In one House of the Dragon image, King Viserys Targaryen appears to have the Catspaw Dagger, the Valyrian steel weapon that was used in the assassination attempt on Bran Stark's life, and later used by Arya to kill the Night King. It's a small but crucial part of Game of Thrones events, but previously there was no confirmation of who the dagger belonged to in the past. Fire and Blood, the book on which House of the Dragon is based, doesn't specify this dagger as being owned by Viserys, or present in the story at all. But it seems the show is retconning it into the narrative, which is a smart move for providing not only a link to Game of Thrones, but a mirror of it as well. It does give the continuity, it does bring that circularity of the story. And I think they're going to have to do lots of this. There's going to be lots of sort of things that they're going to do which will be later incorporated into Game of Thrones. I mean, I say later, I mean later in the chronology rather than, obviously, Game of Thrones earlier. Why am I explaining this? But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that sort of that circularity and looping back and setting up things that have happened. You know, future history. The House of the Dragon teaser trailer seemingly showed the same Catspaw dagger in the possession of Alicent Hightower, Viserys' second wife, who held it aloft, running into court, looking visibly distressed. In the book, with the rivalry that becomes a Targaryen civil war, known as the Dance of the Dragons in its infancy, one of Alicent's children, Aemond, has her eye stabbed out by Lucerys, son of Alicent's rival and Viserys' daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen. The events only refer to it as a dagger, but it seems House of the Dragon is retconning it to be the Valyrian's Catspaw dagger. That means there's a clear line to be drawn through the story, with Viserys giving the dagger to his grandson Lucerys, who then uses it upon Aemond, and then it's taken by Alicent to present it to the court of the wrongdoings of Rhaenyra's kids. It's an integral part of the Dance of the Dragons build-up, and adding the Catspaw dagger into it in such a way makes for a natural connection to Game of Thrones, adding to that lore of that show while not taking away anything from this or feeling forced. Yeah, and as I say, it's one of those things, it's just a small thing, but it shows that the writers are on point with this. They are aware of tiny little details from Game of Thrones, and they're reflecting that back. So it strikes me that the writers know whereof they speak, and they're taking great care. And if you get a writer that knows the product and is taking this level of care on the product, you know it's going to be good. They're really putting the effort in here. So it's going to be little things, and it is like so much. It's the little things that make up a lot of the love that you're going to give this. When you sit down and you watch this and you make an emotional investment in the show, in the characters, in the story. And when the writers are putting an emotional attachment to it as they're writing it, you'll feel that and you will get invested much more deeply into it. And that's why I'm very, very positive about this. Indeed, using the Valyrian steel dagger in the House of the Dragon provides a nice mirror to Game of Thrones. Just as here it goes from Viserys to Lucerys to Alicent by way of great injury to Aemond, in Game of Thrones the dagger goes from Littlefinger to the assassin, or at least it's strongly implied he hired him, although the books point to Joffrey, to Catelyn by way of an attempt on Bran's life. Later it goes from Bran, the boy who will become king, to his sister Arya, a similar passing of the dagger moment, in giving it away for an event that will prove monumental. Even prior to killing the Night King, Arya uses the dagger to murder Littlefinger, which I absolutely loved, the murder of Littlefinger. I've got to be honest, that scene where Sansa, she just sit there, she's looking at Arya, she's laying out the crimes, and then how do you plea, and then turns to Littlefinger, and you can see in that moment, bang, he knows he's finished. And that was the first time I rated Sansa. I thought up until then she was a wishy-washy girl, and at that moment she was a queen. And that was the making of Sansa, in my view. Could be wrong, you may have other views, it doesn't matter, it's a personal view. But to me, that was the moment Sansa became a fully fledged, fully rounded queen. And I liked it, I loved that scene. Game of Thrones Season 7 set up this retcon with a similar Valyrian steel dagger appearing in the book Samwell Tarly reads at the Citadel. That suggests the dagger had a much longer history, likely dating back to the days of Aegon the Conqueror himself. House of the Dragon may not confirm that, but it does appear to be making this weapon's journey all the more storied. And yeah, and as I say, it's one of those things, it's the little details that together the little becomes much more than the whole. You've got your big storylines, and they're great, but it's the little details that run along through them that really, really sort of push the strength of the story. Anyway, that's the first thing. There is another article, which I'm going to go to now. And here it is. And this is from Inverse. And it's a rather hard one to read just because of the way it is. Let me zing this across so I can... Oop. Let me zing this across so I can read it easier. Because I'm a professional. So, like I say, this is from Inverse. And it's saying... HBO is returning to the world of Game of Thrones later this year with the premiere that we all know this, blah, 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 blah. So, House of Dragons will begin with the Targaryens at the height of their powers in Westeros. That, in turn, means the upcoming HBO series has the chance to top Game of Thrones in one epic way. When Game of Thrones begins, the dragons have gone extinct. That's why the birth of 3 new dragons is not only a big deal throughout all of Westeros, but the moment when Daenerys Targaryen becomes a major political and military force. However, there was a long time before Game of Thrones when there were far more dragons than just 3. When House of the Dragons begins, there are many more dragons in the world than fans may expect, and they're all under control of the House Targaryen. As a result, the Targaryens have a firm hold over all of Westeros. That said, House of the Dragon also revolves around a conflict known as Dance of the Dragons, which is essentially a Targaryen civil war. That means House of the Dragons won't just bring more dragons to life than Game of Thrones ever did, but that it will feature multiple sequences in which 2 dragons and their riders comes to blow in the sky. From a technical standpoint, House of the Dragon's Targaryen conflict has the potential to make it an even more visually stunning show than Game of Thrones ever was. However, it's worth noting that the series' inevitable dragon fights won't just serve as major action sequences. While you also, as a little aside, you also have to remember in Game of Thrones there was a lot of dragon damage was visually seen. So, you know, they'll have to visit that. They'll have to visit where some of the dragons went off and destroyed stuff. That will have to be shown, I think. Anyway, the fact that the Targaryens went from being the most powerful royal family in the history of Westeros to being nearly wiped out during Robert's Rebellion is a major focus of Game of Thrones, and it's one of the reasons why Daenerys' rise to power is important as it is. But Game of Thrones avoided using too many flashbacks throughout its run, which meant the House Targaryen's demise was mostly only talked about. While the Dance of the Dragons isn't the conflict that resulted in House Targaryen's ouster, it's a war that seriously weakened them. The Dance of the Dragons, which resulted in the deaths of many dragons, is arguably the reason why the Targaryens became vulnerable enough to be one day forced out of power. The history of the Targaryens is inextricably linked to Game of Thrones, of course. They were a powerful family and they weakened, and the fact that they weakened, where they had control over the whole of Westeros, and it broke into kingdoms, each separately power-based, and you had the Lannisters and the King of the North and all that sort of thing, was undoubtedly due to their civil war. But not having... They had military superiority, because they had the nuclear bombs of the Westeros. They had the dragons. And of course, if you start killing all your own dragons in a civil war, it only strengthens the others. Which was why those 3 in Game of Thrones gave Daenerys ultimate power, even if it was for a very, very short time. But anyway, I shall round off. We'll come up and we'll ping this. We'll put this video to bed. So, yes, another little thing that we've learnt. Regular viewers will know I am so very, very positive about this show. I'm very optimistic it's going to be good. I keep thinking everything I hear builds upon a base of optimism. The writers are obviously taking care. Then there's all the little things that are going in. You've got some great cast. Absolutely fantastic cast. The little things, like I mentioned in there, it's those little details that show that the production really cares about what they're making. The whole production team are doing a great job. And so I am very excited, very positive, and I'm looking forward to this as, you know, unbelievable amount. Every time I find a new bit of snippet of information, though, I will be making a video. I will be putting out there. I will be sharing it. I will be promoting it, because we've all got to look forward to this show. It gives us something all to bond over, because we all bonded over how crap Season 8 was. Let's not talk about it anymore. So let's bond over something positive. Anyway, let's call it quits on this video. If you like what you see and hear on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications on future output. Leave a like, leave a comment, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and goodbye.